Well, we cynically call it a managerial graveyard, and the November EFL Championship international break is less than 2 hours old, and Norwich have swung the axe. Liam Manning sacked by Norwich, with the club in 23rd in the Championship. Only Sheffield Wednesday, who have obviously had a -12 administration points deduction and have been completely beleaguered pretty much right through the summer, are below Norwich. Today, it just seemed destined. This was the way it was going to go for Liam Manning and Norwich today. They led against Leicester City, and they surrendered a lead yet again. They lost at home yet again. Played 7, lost 7 at Carrow Road for Norwich and Liam Manning. And a late stoppage time winning goal for Marty Cifuentes, a manager under pressure at Leicester, is the last act of Liam Manning's cup of tea. 15 games at Norwich. Let's read from the statement on their website. Sporting director Ben Napper, using the word we, not I, we have tried absolutely everything possible to work through this incredibly challenging period, but unfortunately, given the recent run of results and performances, we have been left with no choice other than to make a change at this stage. I'll stop there, because that's a premise that I think 99% of you in the comments are going to agree with. Often we get a bit of debate on managerial sackings where, you know, people are like, oh, I could see that turning, or the job he's done doesn't warrant him being sacked. Unfortunately, by any metric, the job Liam Manning has done warrants him being sacked. And we can talk about whether Liam Manning is a good manager or a bad manager based on these 15 games, you know, as a microcosm of the rest of his career where he's done pretty well. We can talk about the issues at Norwich at large, and, you know, more from Ben Napper, I'm sure, in a minute. But even if you put Pep Guardiola in and he'd had this home record and this run for this team at this level after the spend in the summer, you kind of have to sack him, don't you? And I actually do agree with the wording in the statement that there's no choice. Here we are, 15 games in, and, you know, a Norwich side, a club that generally challenges towards the top of the Championship or wins it twice in the last 7 years. From 2019, they that first win, and then a couple of years later after the the kind of yo-yo up down. So yeah, it's not where Norwich should be generally as a club, and it's not where Norwich should be after the spend in the summer. Which brings us back to Ben Napper, who says Liam and his staff worked tirelessly to move our club forward. I'm sure they did. And they're all fundamentally good people. We wish them the best in whatever comes next. We'll talk about that in terms of Manning in a minute. We very much understand the frustration and criticism from our supporters. Results and performance haven't been good enough, blah, blah. We accept that responsibility. I suppose he's speaking for himself and the higher-ups, the Atanasio family, who completed their sort of slow-moving takeover. I can't remember how long ago, 12 months, 18 months ago. You correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about that. But it's now imperative, this is interesting, that we start to repair the relationship with our supporters and do everything we can to give them something to get behind. So it's interesting they've acknowledged that the fans were not having Manning. And he was always going to be the fall guy. You're not going to sack the owner, are you? You know, they own the club. You sell the club. You don't sack the owner. And if the owners are still giving, you know, autonomy to Ben Napper and they believe in him, then he's not going to sack himself, the director of football there at Norwich, the sporting director, whatever language they used to describe him. So it was always going to be Manning that went in this this kind of crisis that Norwich are in. Whether his position is tenable going forward, I do not know. We'll find out more there. It was Stuart Webber, wasn't it, who was the previous guy at Norwich, who brought in David Wagner, and then two managers now under Liam Manning Liam Manning, under Ben Napper have been fired. Johannes Hoff-Torp and Liam Manning. So his record is not great in terms of managers so far, Ben Napper. And this is where we get into the conversation of what the hell has actually gone wrong here. This is a Norwich side that scored loads of goals last season and finished really badly under Torrup and sacked him. They had Josh Sargent, who is still there. Obviously, Borja, Sainz, Marcelino, Nunes have gone. They were the kind of three big saleable assets. It tends to be that Norwich sell saleable assets. That's just been the way. We wondered whether there might be a change from Delia and Stuart Webber's self-funded era, which basically translated as the owners aren't putting any money in, beyond the kind of interesting wording of that. But I don't know, Atanasios have got a little bit more. I know it's impossible in terms of the way things are financially in the Championship with the parachute teams each year, and Norwich having been a parachute team and run out, it's then everything shrinks down, doesn't it, in terms of turnover, incomes. And I've got to say, Norwich have been absolutely brilliant at, managing that shrinkage over the years by selling players and filling the stadium and trading really well. But you are only one bad window away from things grinding to a halt. And the thing with calling it a bad window is that the signings that Norwich have made, the sort of 50, 60 million or whatever it is that they've spent, might come good. It might come good. And you'll look back and say, well, maybe that wasn't a bad window. But if you do that in a position where you've had a change of ownership, where you've sacked a manager, where you've brought a new manager in, and it goes like this, that is kind of by definition a bad window, because you make wholesale changes. You have to think about the here and now. And yes, there's still a Josh Sargent, who a lot of people would rank as the top, striker, who you'd want to move him around any club. He'd probably fit in the Championship, wouldn't he? Or maybe even higher. But other than that, there's a Kenny McLean there in terms of experience. Even brought Shane Duffy back. I know they tried to bring Jeff Schlupp in. But otherwise, the players that have come in at Norwich this summer, right now, and they may turn out to be good players, Oscar Schwartau, Pele Martson, Mirko Topic, Pape Diallo, Matis Kvistgaard, he scored a couple of goals recently, Kovacevic, the goalkeeper, Jakov, just tons and tons of them. They may turn out to be good players. Jacob Wright, etc. Harry Darling, he should already be a good player. He's one I should add into the ready-to-go list. But right now, it's not been working. So there are questions outside of Liam Manning at Norwich as to how the club are now managing this period where, they've been absolutely brilliant, Norwich, from the Lambert era, the double promotion at either being in the Premier League, challenging at the top of the Championship, being able to overpower the rest of the Championship. I know people didn't like the Stuart Webber terminology of like a top 26 club, but I get it. I really, really get it. If you can't be in the Premier League, be a powerhouse in the Championship, and you're never too far from the Premier League by definition. So it's a bit of a case of where are Norwich going. And look, the best case scenario for Norwich fans and Ben Napper is they just had the wrong manager. And it might be that anybody would have struggled at this time if the recruitment's all kind of loaded up on future performance rather than right now. And they put another manager in and get through this season, and they're challenging again next season, and then they're back in the Premier League after long. That is the absolute best scenario, because they are they've got to do nothing else this season other than just get away from the horrifically bad start they've had. The issue is if things are systemically worse at Norwich City, that you could maybe suggest that whoever they'd put in this summer and whoever they put in now is going to struggle with what they've been given, just in terms of if the players just aren't ready to play Championship football now, and you can't put a winning team out. We're going to find out. There is no doubt that Manning failed and has failed badly here, and I like him a lot. Did really well at MK. Ended badly, but they sold all his players after a brilliantly 89 points, third place finish. So I'll give him a pass for that. Oxford took them really quickly to the top of League One, and Bristol City left them in the playoffs. So I really wonder if he had his time over. I know people say, oh no, if I had my time over, I would have made the same decision. I think I made the right decision at the time and it hasn't worked out. But it doesn't look great having finished 6th at Bristol City and got into the playoffs and put them on a kind of 20-year peak or whatever it was, 17 seasons since they've been in the playoffs, something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. If he would have just stayed and kept building things up there, because they didn't have an exodus of players like teams that kind of punch their weight and get in the playoffs. Normally, those teams disband really quickly, and they haven't. He would have had a similar squad and could have kept building. Ifs, buts, maybes. Do I think Liam Manning has failed massively in this job? Yes. Do I think he's a bad manager because of that? No. Do I think there are issues at Norwich that have not helped? Yeah, I do. And it's very, very clear looking at the way they've been losing games and finding ways to lose games. Yes, that is, you can proportion the blame to Manning, that you have to build a winning mentality and you have to build a winning side and play winning football. And he hasn't managed to do that. But the players have wilted, haven't they? And Norwich have been in games and found ways to lose them and collapsed in second halves over and over again. And even today they had the lead, and unfortunately powder puff, fragile, flaky teams find ways to lose games. You have a good period in a game, and when you have a bad period and you've got no confidence, no resilience, no winning mentality, when you're not a team, you'll just lose whatever situation you're in. You kind of have to get yourself 2-0 up, and the opponents have to have a man sent off for you to even get through a game. And that seems to be what's happened here, and obviously culminating in this horrific home record where just the pressure of Carrow Road, and you see everything feeding in and compounding. So that's my take on it. He had to go, didn't he? I don't think this makes him a terrible manager, even though he has done a bad job. I think people try and oversimplify, don't they? And you've got to try and hold all these positions in your head if you want to have it truly balanced. And I do believe that this guy cannot be, a charlatan or a fraud or a terrible manager, and he can go on and do other stuff in the game. But he has done a bad job here. And I do think there are problems at Norwich. And it looks like potentially Ben Napper has got one appointment left before all eyes are going to be on him. And it's like, hang on a minute. Who's the bad guys here? Who's the problem? Because it may be such responsibility on these sporting directors when you're choosing managers and players for those managers, that if it continually goes wrong, then he's going to be the next head on the block potentially. So in terms of Manning, I think someone else will take him. I think he's a decent manager in the right situation. This wasn't it, and yeah, he's done a horrific job. Yeah, I get it. But I think championship level as well. I think he's proven with what he did at Bristol City. I think he'd be unlucky to have to drop back down to League One, but we shall see what happens. He could probably do with a rest after this experience, but you never know what's going to pop up. In terms of Norwich, what the hell happens next? There's obviously an ex-Norwich captain, Russ Martin, who's out of work. Gary O'Neill was in the promotion team, wasn't he, with Alex Neil? And he's available and appears to have just turned down Wolves, or not wanted to have the conversations with Wolves in terms of going back into a Premier League job there. So there's a couple of names out there. We'll see what happens. Obviously, Napa has gone foreign unknown in terms of Johannes Hoftorp, and he's gone championship, someone whose career was building. And I suppose from a Norwich point of view and from a Liam Manning point of view, you got to hope that you didn't get the guy at the peak of his powers. And I'll give an Ipswich reference here. Ipswich took Paul Hurst after the one outlier season that he's never got close to in his career before or since. And, I don't think that's the case with Manning. I think he's got it in him to do something similar again. But you never want to look back and say, oh, yeah, we clearly took that guy at the wrong time. And that was the peak of his powers. And he wasn't ever going to be capable of doing what Norwich want him to do. And that's promotion up to the Premier League. Although he was 3 games away, wasn't he, with Bristol City in terms of getting them into the playoffs. Let me know your thoughts. What next for Norwich? Who do you think can come in and pull them up from the bottom of the table? I don't think it's a relegation squad. It's obviously a squad that's not ready, in terms of there being a lot of young players. But surely, this is a good job that someone can come in and raise the tide pretty quickly if they can build some confidence amongst the players and the fans. And what next for Norwich? Because I've outlined the best case scenario, which is these players aren't all dreadful and, a manager comes in and trends up. What happens if they are dreadful? What happens if they've managed this really badly? What happens if the shrinkage continues and someone cannot get them away from the bottom? Then Norwich will be relegated to League One, which just seems an absurd possibility. But look at Luton last season, straight through the Premier League and straight down into League One. So it can happen. And that is the absolute worst case scenario there, that they bring someone in and nothing really changes and Norwich get caught with their pants down after, being a very powerful Championship team over, the last decade or last couple, really. So let me know your thoughts on the decision, Manning, Norwich, Napa, and anything I've had to say. Liam Manning out of Norwich. Let the November international break commence.